Hello and good afternoon. Happy new school year. In her opening message yesterday, Dr. Dixon mentioned that this was the best time of year, and I couldn't agree more. Our academic services team is so thrilled to welcome you and our students back for All In Learning. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Kira Slombach, the new Chief of Academic Services. Our team today, in partnership with Celebrate One from Mayor Ginther's office and Nationwide Children's Hospital, are excited to talk to you. You will hear about how we can affect change in Columbus City schools. Maureen Stapleton, Executive Director of Celebrate One, will share the current state of health in Franklin County, and we'll learn more about the Celebrate One initiative. Dr. Sarah Bodie from Nationwide Children's Hospital will review critical data and discuss the importance of whole child support. And then you will hear from our academic services team with ideas of how we can respond and support the health and welfare of our Columbus City School students. Before we play a clip of this TED Talk, I want to recognize the feedback our team has heard from principals, teachers, and support staff providers. I hear the frustrations around professional development and the feelings of lack of support. While systemic change cannot be made overnight, I hope today you realize that I am listening, and our team will be better. There'll be several updates this week regarding already published content and how we plan to change it so that it is more meaningful and useful for you. My aim is to support you as leaders of buildings, leaders in classrooms. You are the most important people in Columbus City Schools because of your work in classrooms and with students every day. Our team has been inspired by some of the actionable steps Cleo Wade shares in this TED Talk. We won't watch the entire 11 minutes, but we will share the link with you so that you're able to watch it later. It is very inspirational. Today we will just listen to 1 minute, and we hope you recognize and able to take away some inspiration for how we can change the world, because we're excited to partner with you in that. And we're ready for the clip.
River of justice. Whether it's Hurricane Katrina, Harvey, Irma, or Maria, people did not say, there is so much damage, what should I do? They got to work on what they could do. Those with boats got in their boats and started loading in every woman, man, and child they came across. Near and far, people gave their dollars, they gave their cents, they gave their hearts, they gave their spirit. We spend so much time thinking we don't have the power to change the world. We forget that the power to change someone's life is always in our hands. Change-making does not belong to one group of people. It belongs to all of us. You don't have to wait on anyone to tell you that you are in this. Begin. Start by doing what you can with what you've got, where you are, and in your own way.
So with that, how would you change the world? What are some ideas that you can throw up in the chat that might be action steps you can immediately take? After watching the 11-minute clip and reflecting, I pulled out some statements in blue and then crosswalk them to the statements in red and what they mean for us in our Columbus City schools. I know I can't do everything, but I can do something. And one of the most important, impactful somethings we can do is to have high expectations for all of our students. Let's be brave enough to care. In 20 years, what will our students remember? We know we're facing the need to accelerate learning and prioritize our standards, and that's critical work. But also, what will our students take away from our classrooms? And chances are it's their relationships with you, and that will carry them beyond our Columbus City schools. Change-making does not belong to a single group. We heard her say that just now. Change and the ability to make an impact belongs to all of us. It does not solely belong to those with titles, and in fact, I'd love to hear about those of you that can let students lead in the classroom and impact change for themselves. And most importantly, what Cleo Wade leaves us with is that the importance of being good to as many people as possible, and we can't underestimate the importance or the impact of a single act of kindness. So, with these inspirational thoughts in mind, we are eager to share a message from Maureen Stapleton and Dr. Sarah Bodie regarding the health and wellness of our community.
Hello, my name is Maureen Stapleton, and I am the Executive Director of Celebrate One. And it is our pleasure to present with our partner and our lead project manager some very important information for the teachers of the Columbus City Schools. To give you a level set of how this presentation happened, let me give you a little bit of information about Celebrate One. Celebrate One is the infant mortality arm of city government. We believe that every baby deserves to celebrate his or her birthday, his first birthday, regardless of race, address, or family income. Celebrate One is a place-based collective impact initiative to reduce infant mortality, improve health equity, so more babies reach this important milestone. We have become concerned over the last year or so that data is going in the wrong direction. And so a similar presentation was made last week to the principals of Columbus City Schools. Here's what we know about infant mortality and perinatal and prenatal health factors. We know that 50% of what happens to folks is associated with what we call the social determinants of health: housing, transportation, education, and employment. 20% is due to the care, quality, and access that they receive. And 30% is because of health behaviors, all of which can be controlled when you know better, you do better. What became alarming to us is the data between 2019 and 2020. And so I'd like to show you just briefly why this matters. And Dr. Bodie, who is with us today from Nationwide Children's Hospital, will tell you more about how we can impact this. This is a chart that we show when we talk about prioritizing racial equity to accelerate progress in infant mortality. And you will note that we have been successful as a city of reducing infant mortality in the white community by 28% and in the Black community by 23%. But you will also see on this slide the differences between the bars. The blue bars are non-Hispanic white numbers, and the green bars are non-Hispanic Black numbers. The difference and the disparity between the two is 2.8. That means that Black babies are 2.8 more times likely to die than their white counterparts. That's simply not acceptable, and we must do better. And this is how you can play a role. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Bodie, who is going to take you through some slides that talk about the state of child health in Franklin County. Dr. Bodie will speak with you about teen birth, well check visits, behavioral health, and sexually transmitted diseases. And then later, we will make sure that you have a handout that shows how you can impact and how you can access some of these services for your students. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Sarah Bodie from Nationwide Children's Hospital.
For those who don't know me, I work at Nationwide Children's Hospital. I'm a pediatrician in an outpatient clinic there, and I'm the medical director of our school health services. So this is the work we do with all of our school-based health centers and mobiles and extended services within Columbus City school districts and elsewhere. So we're going to talk a little bit about those metrics that Maureen mentioned. And really the goal here is we're really looking at what has happened, what have been the trends, what's happening right now, both to students around the country in Ohio, but then actually right in your school district too. So the first thing we're going to talk about is teenage births. We know that teenage births are actually a leading cause of high school dropout in girls, but we do know that teenage birth rate has declined since its peak in the 1950s, which is really optimistic news. The primary driver of that decline in birth rate is really the use of contraceptives and more specifically access to comprehensive reproductive health care. So girls that are able to really meet with the primary care provider or other provider and get quick and confidential access to this. So this just looks at the why, and it ties back to what Maureen just talked about. And this is looking at the percent of Franklin County preterm births by maternal age group. So what does this mean? It means that when you are pregnant and have a baby, what are the chances that that baby is going to be born early? And what we know is that for this group of 15 to 19-year-olds, our teenage moms, that they have a higher chance of having this preterm baby. Well, that's really important because when you have a baby early, that sets you up for a host of risk factors for that baby and really higher percentage chance that that baby's going to have a harder time getting to their first birthday. So again, what Maureen's talking about with her work and with Celebrate One and how important that is. So this is one of the drivers of that, is to really help think about how we can access this teenage population. This is just looking at, again, that infant mortality rate that I was mentioning. So as you have more babies that are born preterm, then this is what happens with those infant mortality rates. And so, of course, as you can see there, that the highest bar there is in that 15 to 19-year age range. And the other really important thing about this is that even though these teen birth rates have declined over the years, and we talked about that, and it's great, they've declined in all racial and ethnic backgrounds, but what you can see is that there is still a large disparity there. So when we look at our non-Hispanic Black population, what we see is that although there's been a decline overall, we still have not done enough work to close that gap. And so this is incredibly important to us as we work to provide equitable access for this reproductive health care and other prenatal care and postnatal care for these particular populations, to make sure that what are we doing to provide that equitably, so we work to close that gap, even as these rates continue to decline. So the other thing we're talking about is how people access that type of care. And one of the most important things we talk about is your well check. Now, you may think, okay, great, you go to the doctor and you get a well check. What does that really mean? And we're going to really talk about what that means, but that's the comprehensive access that teens have and other students have to getting to that overall health and wellness, to then get to address all those things like reproductive health care and many other issues. Nationwide Children's Hospital Network has a large network that services Medicaid population, and we see over 300,000 visits for kids a year. And part of that is doing these comprehensive annual well child checks for school age kids. And across the network, we have about 72% of kids that are on Medicaid in Franklin County that work with us and complete those routine well checks. So that's actually not a bad number, 72%. We're working really hard to make that higher. But what I'm going to show you next slide is what that means for kids specifically in Columbus City School District. So what we have here on this chart is we have Columbus City school regions broken out. So you guys know what school you're in, what region. So the 6 regions there. We have your total enrollment of students in those. And then out of those, what percent of your students are on Medicaid? So for many of your schools, that's actually a fairly high percentage of kids that are on Medicaid that attend your school. And when we look at the overall rate of kids that are up to date on that well care, you can see in that blue bar, it's 35%. So now compare that to what I just said at the 72%, now we're down to 35. And then not up to date, 62%. So you can see that large gap there for students within Columbus City School Districts, and why we are so interested in continuing to partner and figure out how we can get kids improved access to these services. I will show you on the side, it shows within each region how many school-based health centers, those are full doctor's offices inside schools in your region, and our mobile medical units that go. And so you can see that we do have some services in every single region across the district. So what does this mean? What if a kid misses his checkup? What's that really all about? And it's really about many, many different things. But one of the things we think about is immunizations as an example. This comes up in the fall as we're looking at the vaccine exclusion date. So making sure kids are up to date on those important immunizations. That's particularly important this year. We do provide COVID vaccines as well, but even those routine vaccines to prevent other outbreaks. We talk about growth and development, overall physical well-being. We do hearing and vision screens, but we also do behavioral health. So we do assessments at these well checks for their social emotional health, their behavioral health evaluations, and actually even providing diagnosis and medication management for kids that have primary mental health conditions. So again, all of that can get done within the well check. And then there's other possible medical diagnoses, for example, like STI screening as an example. So sometimes we call well checks a host of things, and we don't care what everybody calls them. So if you need a sports physical, if you're coming in because you need to get in because the football game's coming up and you don't have it yet, that's great. What we're going to do is this comprehensive service. If you come in for a checkup, that's what we're going to do. If you come in because you need a work permit signed, this is what we're going to do. So this comprehensive evaluation and services is what we do every time when we're seeing patients for this well child care, and it's why it's so important. Other trends we've seen through the pandemic, we have had an issue with worsening obesity in our country for the last several decades. And what we've seen is that trend has continued locally here. And then we really had an uptick in some of those concerns through the pandemic. So this slide looks again at our nationwide children's primary care network. So those thousands of children that we care for here in Franklin County. And you can see the rates of obesity broken out by age group here. And I think what you can see is the blue bar is what we saw in 2019 prior to the pandemic. And then the purple bar is what we saw over the course of the pandemic. And I think you can see that there has been an increase in every single category of age there. And so this is really important. As kids have been out of school and out of their routine, they've had less opportunity to get out and be active. They've had less access to maybe healthy, nutritious foods. They've been home, maybe in a more confined environment. And so we've seen that spill over to these increasing rates of obesity. And I think, think about this with these charts. From 10 to 13-year-olds, half of the kids that we are seeing are meeting that overweight and obesity category. So this is really something that we take seriously and address at every single visit when kids come in to access us for services. The other thing we've talked about through the pandemic and have continued to address and seen a change is around kids' social, emotional, and mental health. So 1 in 6 students right now has enough behavioral or emotional symptoms and impairment to be diagnosed with a disorder, whether that's ADHD, ODD, anxiety, depression. We have seen an uptick in all cases of that for kids as they've been accessing our services. And, we've all been stressed out through this pandemic, and it's been no different for kids as they've had to navigate these changes. And so again, we've seen that uptick in this as well there. One of the things we worry about is suicide and depression. So this is just showing you through this slide an example of what happens for adolescents when they come in to see us. And we look at not just suicide attempts, but even the broader range. So the percentage of kids that are having our persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness, kids that have seriously considered attempting suicide or made a plan, or the ones who have actually attempted suicide. And what you can see as we've gone through the years, that those rates have gone up in all categories. So now almost 40% of kids that we're seeing are meeting that criteria for persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. Well, that's where we want to engage with those kids and students, is at that first phase before they progress through this chart to the rest. So again, one of those things that we're seeing an increasing trend in both depressive symptoms daily and that consideration of suicide and actual suicide attempts. The other thing we talk about is sexually transmitted infections. So those are among teens 15 to 19 years of age in Franklin County. This is really important to us because for teens, this can affect their long-term fertility, and it can have some really long-term negative health outcomes for them. And one of the things that we continue to see that worries us is, again, back to this equity issue. We see that African-American teens had a 9.3 times higher rate of gonorrhea than the white teen counterparts. And then if you look at chlamydia, they had a 7.1 time higher rate of chlamydia than their white teen counterparts. So again, we are not getting good access to screening and care and prevention for all of our teens across the board. The other thing is that females are more at risk of this. So female teens have either a 1.9 or a 3 times higher reported rate of both gonorrhea and chlamydia than their male counterparts. So again, really thinking about those teen girls that are in minority groups as well, and what is their access? What have we been able to provide them as far as resources and education and quick identification and treatment? These are all the things that we think about how we can move the needle and improve access to for our student population. The other thing we think about a lot is minority youth. So again, 5 to 10% of teens identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or non-binary. And again, 1 to 2% even as transgender or gender diverse. So there are a lot of disparities in this population. So we really care about these kids and students because they often can be victimized. They can have a higher rate of depression or substance use. Many of them can experience homelessness through their high school years. And they're at high risk of both sexually transmitted infections, but also some forced intercourse or dating violence. So this is a population that really we need to be reaching out to proactively, wrapping our arms around, getting them the supports and services they need. And a growing body of literature has demonstrated that adolescent girls are more likely to report teen pregnancies. And there's really some stigma and discrimination that plays a role in all of these disparities. So this is really, again, a population that we really want to make sure that we're paying attention to, providing that outreach and connecting them to services. So call to action. What are we doing about this? Start of the school year, there's a lot going on as a teacher. We in healthcare, we know that when we're doing healthcare, we're only affecting a very small part of a student's life and their overall health and wellness when they finish school. And we know that their education is so important. And so we are those experts in the healthcare and thinking about how can we help to support your students with their health so that then you can do all the great work you're doing on education. And we know conversely, you are there to educate your students, and you can't provide a good education to your student if they're not healthy and they're not showing up healthy to be able to learn. And so we have to do this together as a group. Many students are facing challenges we both know around transportation, competing priorities through COVID. Some of our families have lost family members, have had transportation issues, job loss, homelessness, unstable housing. So all of those things that have affected these kids for the last year and a half and made it unlikely or unable for them to, again, access or prioritize this routine care. So we really have to have a whole child approach, and reaching out into the community and partnering with you all is key for this to be successful, because again, none of us can do this alone. So one of the things we talk about is what are our school health services? And we have a whole child model, just like you guys do with education. We think about the same thing with healthcare, right? So we're thinking about the student at the center of this, and how do we wrap around all the services we have to make sure we're supporting them in all of their healthcare needs. And that's really important to us. And of course, that includes just wellness education as well as medical services. So thinking of, again, more broadly for our students. So we have a lot of services that are available to our students. So one of those is our school-based primary care. So we have fixed site school-based health centers. We call them to the students' doctor's offices inside the schools because that's how they know what they are instead of using fancy terms. And in those school-based health centers, we have 15 of them, and we really look at how can we get at the students who haven't had the chance to access a regular medical home and regular services and do outreach and provide that to those students. We can see students that are from the school we're at. We can also see students from other Columbus City schools that come over, and that works all the time for us. So we have anyone and everyone that identifies a need and is willing to bring those students over to us. So sometimes that means athletic coaches that come and drive students over because they need to get, again, that well care before they can compete. School nurses that we partner with so closely that will identify needs in students, teachers, guidance counselors, social workers, everyone that partners with us to say, okay, we see this student, they have an identified need, how can we get them connected to you? And we will bend over backwards to make that work through transportation. We do also have school-based behavioral health. So those are the one-on-one counseling services that many of our counselors provide in your area schools, as well as group therapy and some prevention programs that they do. And just to note, we work very closely with primary care and our behavioral health services, and it's often both. So if we're seeing a kid for a checkup and we're identifying that, for example, they have depression or anxiety, well, then we're helping to diagnose that, get them connected to counseling services, and maybe provide medication if that's what's right for that student. So again, that wraparound approach to do it all together. School-based asthma therapy is a program we have in many of your schools where the kids get their controller medications at school. That's a super successful program because it keeps kids out of the ER, not getting asthma attacks, not having to go into the hospital as much. CareLink is services where we partner with the school nurses so they can really work to see what's going on within the medical record of these students and help get their care plans put together. We have other specialty services such as a wheelchair clinic we can give you flyers and more information about. We also provide a ton of wellness education programming, both with healthy relationships, sexual health education, but also a host of different physical health education programs. So lots of opportunity there to connect. And then we do COVID services too. So the COVID vaccine, rapid testing, all of those things that we need to do to keep your students in school, in class, being able to stay there and learn and not be pulled out for that. So again, so many services that we have available. I'll end with just a short story. We see kids all the time that, they're in school and they're even feet away from this Nationwide Children's Hospital, this world-class health center, but they still have unmet health needs. And how can we be in the schools and how does that help? I saw a student a few years ago at one of our elementary schools that was seeing me for potential for ADHD. She just could not stay in her seat, was having a really hard time. And basically, when we were able to see her and do an evaluation, what we found is she actually had a rash we call scabies, where you have this mite that actually burrows under your skin. And she had had that for about a year. And this scabies had been untreated. Her grandparents, who were guardians, didn't know what to do, didn't access services, and were not able to. And really, through work with the school nurse and myself and the family and getting treatment right at the school so we could help this child, she did beautifully in school the rest of that year. Did not have ADHD, just was unable to sit still because of the itching. And once she could get under health treatment, then she could be in class and learn. And that's just a really small example of how all of these patients can connect their health and education together. And so we're excited to be able to continue to partner with you, and you'll get more information from us as the weeks go on in school.
As you receive flyers and opportunities to share information about the services of Celebrate One, especially through our Teen Reproductive Health Education Program or Nationwide Children's Hospital, take a minute and make sure that you're sharing those with your students. Follow us on your social media and post and help us spread the word about the services that are available through both organizations. Invite us to events. CPH, our public health department, Celebrate One, and Nationwide Children's Hospital will be happy to come to events and share information with you. Make referrals to NCH. They're there to serve. And you will receive, again, a package of information that goes into detail about all of the services that are provided. And then finally, beyond making referrals, support our peer and parent engagement opportunities as they come up. It's absolutely critical. We know that we cannot do this without you. We wanted to ensure, and your leadership in Columbus City Schools wanted you to know what was happening in the state of our children in Franklin County. We are happy to have shared the information, but we are also invigorated by the opportunity to impact some of the trends that we are seeing in Franklin County and Columbus. And so we thank you, last slide, we thank you, and we thank you, not on behalf of just these organizations, but all of these babies that will be your students in just a few years. Have a great day.
Our partnerships with Columbus Public Health, Celebrate One, and Nationwide Children's Hospital are critical, and together we all agree that a strong education is paramount to the health of our students. This graphic represents our academic response to some of what we heard today. We see our levers for change paired with the initiatives from our Academic Services Office on ways that we reach those board goals. We seek your partnership in this work as well. We know all Columbus City School students can achieve, and we are committed to increasing academic achievement by establishing more inclusive practices, dedicating our resources to rigorous core instruction accessible by all students, and responding to last year's learning environments and challenges with a robust accelerated learning plan. Next, I will introduce our new Executive Director of Specialized Instruction and Inclusion, Kelly Rivers.
What guides our work in CCS? Our work is aligned to the district's board goals: strengthening reading proficiency, our portrait of a graduate, and closing opportunities gaps. This is our why. And how will we achieve this? Through intervention supports, the whole child, aligning our resources, and being culturally responsive. And one of our pathways is through inclusive practices. Inclusive practices include our students in all areas of development: academic, social, and emotional, as well as physical and mental health. Dr. Bodie and Mrs. Stapleton mentioned that there is a critical need to address the whole child, as this is the work of the community and this is the work of our district. Inclusive practices includes all settings, in the play, in the lunchroom, and yes, in the classroom. So what is an inclusive classroom? An inclusive classroom is a general education classroom where students with and without learning differences learn together. They're welcoming and support the diverse academic, social, and emotional and communication needs of all of our students. So how do our students benefit through inclusive practices? Well, we know that in inclusive environments, students with disabilities develop stronger skills in reading and in mathematics. They have higher rates of attendance and are less likely to have behavioral concerns. They are more likely to complete secondary school than students who have not been included. And we know that students with disabilities who are educated in the general education classrooms outperform their peers who have been educated in segregated settings. We know this. But we also know that inclusive environments benefit our typical students as well. Typical students benefit by increased opportunities for scaffolding and differentiation, but all students benefit. We create high expectations for all students in inclusive classrooms. We expose all students to a variety of opportunities to learn in a diverse and safe environment. And inclusive practices encourages respect for all people. So let's take a look at this model. In this model, we find 4 different graphics. There's first a model of exclusion. There are students who are included in the larger circle, but we see that there are students who are individually observing and they're not included. In the model of segregation, we see students are grouped, but they are removed from the larger circle. They're observing, but they're doing so collectively. In the model of integration, students are finally included in the larger circle, but they are still grouped away from their peers, sometimes observing, sometimes participating. But in the inclusion model, everyone is all in. Everyone has a voice and everyone has choice. And this includes our English language learners, our students with special needs, and our gifted students. It includes all of our students. All means all. So what can you do? As you begin to establish your classroom routines, we know that in Columbus City Schools, we are establishing classrooms that create a supportive, respectful environment that promotes diversity and fairness. We have high expectations for all of our students. We create a supportive peer culture, both inside and outside the classroom. And we plan learning, which includes participation from everyone and encourages success. We take a community approach to learning and to teaching. But let's take an additional small step. As we open this school year, let's take a small step to try one of these UDL strategies within the first 30 days of school for all of your students. And this includes our students with special needs. Post learning targets and review them with your students as part of your daily learning routine. Consider alternative learning outcomes and products that meet a variety of learning styles that show both progress and mastery. And then provide flexible learning spaces that encourages learning in our students' best environment. I will now introduce to you Leslie Kelly, who is the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning.
Thanks, Kelly. The fundamental core of Tier 1 instruction is that it is instruction for all. It is the foundation for every child, in every classroom, every day. The cornerstone of a guaranteed and viable curriculum is strong Tier 1 instruction and a system of supports for students when needed. Tier 1 quality core instruction is first in this system and describes the researched and evidence-based effective classroom instruction that all students should receive. Tier 1 instruction includes differentiation to meet specific student needs, small group instruction, accommodations, and modifications. A smaller number of students may need supplemental small group targeted intervention, Tier 2. Tier 2 intervention is often delivered in the classroom and is in addition to Tier 1 core instruction. Despite Tier 2 efforts, some students may not progress and are thus provided with Tier 3 intensive interventions, often delivered individually and in a separate setting, and with more frequent monitoring. When a student needs support in addition to the strong Tier 1 instruction, the MTSS framework will provide a map to guide the identification of the specific need and the targeted response. Keep in mind that the MTSS decision trees are not a vertical response. They are fluid as students move in and out of supports based on student need. The goal of MTSS is to strengthen student skills, fill knowledge gaps, and teach strategies to ensure student success in Tier 1 instruction. A guaranteed and viable curriculum ensures that all students have equal opportunity to learn. When thinking about Tier 1 instruction, think of our curriculum guides as the driver. The guides provide the what, the standards and the sequence in which they are taught. The frameworks are the navigator. The frameworks provide the how, the pedagogy. The district-adopted curriculum resources are the delivery truck. These resources are the tools used to travel to your destination. They are a tool through which instruction is delivered. Our tightly held curriculum guides, frameworks, and district-adopted resources are the foundation for our CCS guaranteed and viable curriculum, helping to ensure each child will have access to a highly effective teacher and access to the same content, knowledge, and skills in each section or class. As we implement our guaranteed and viable curriculum, we must consider the whole child as we plan academic and social-emotional learning experiences. The 5 tenets of Ohio's Whole Child Framework are 5 commonly held beliefs reflecting desired student conditions leading to success in life and learning. When students are healthy, feel safe, have strong supportive relationships, are challenged, and experience success, and are engaged in learning that is relevant and meaningful, they are more likely to enjoy learning, to develop positive social skills, and achieve greater academic success. We must know our students to grow our students. Dr. Bodie and Ms. Stapleton shared strong relationships are critical. The nature of our relationship with students dictates the impact that we have on them. If we want students to have a positive and lasting difference, on our students, we need to forge productive teacher-student relationships. A crucial part of building relationships is making connections and creating an environment that is supportive and encouraging. We want our students to feel valued, respected, and cared for, and motivated to learn. By giving students a voice, creating a connected classroom culture, listening to understand, and striving to know and appreciate our students' world beyond our classroom, while strong relationships are forged. Research tells us that teacher-students relationships have a 0.52 effect size, which is significantly above the 0.40 average effect size we would expect from a year's schooling. We also know that effective teacher-student relationships increase levels of students' interest and enjoyment of the class, increase level of students' academic achievement, and decrease the occurrence of classroom disruptions. As we consider the 5 tenets of Ohio's Whole Child Framework, challenged, healthy, safe, engaged, and supported, a thread emerges and makes connections throughout the district. With this in mind, it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Kenny Lee, Executive Director of Accelerated and Extended Learning.
Thanks, Leslie. The core of this work focuses on accelerating and extending learning for all students, from our valedictorians to the students who struggle academically even before COVID-19. The new post-pandemic research is focused on learning acceleration. Why? Because with the right strategies like MTSS, whole child care, intensive tutoring, innovative uses of instructional time and space, they are the best ways to address the elephants in the room. Learning loss and engagement declines. There are two acceleration strategies that we have started and will continue. The first is engagement. And through our summer experience, thousands of students, pre-K through 12th grade, were able to access programming focused on engagement with the hopes of bringing that enthusiasm and excitement to school this very Thursday. The second strategy that was implemented last year was a focus on priority standards and content priorities at elementary and secondary. Priority standards combined with high expectations and purposeful interventions are the how in accelerating all of our students. Looking ahead, the third strategy that we will implement, and some of you have already implemented, is high-intensity tutoring and school-based interventions. What does extended learning look like in your school? More math, more reading, more support? How can you do that? What could high-intensity, small group to individualized tutoring look like in your building? What do you need to make that happen? As Cleo Wade says in her video, change-making does not belong to one group of people. It doesn't belong solely to administrators or principals. It requires all of us, teachers, support staff, principals, administrators, working together to make this change happen. Finally, the end goal of acceleration is graduation and beyond. At secondary, we know that every credit counts, and through building-based credit recovery and an all-in non-grad outreach, we will increase our 4- and 5-year graduation rates. Graduation and the new portrait of a graduate are our core business, and it begins in pre-K, continues with high expectations in every school at every level. It requires all hands on deck, like Dr. Dixon mentioned in her welcome speech yesterday. CCS is all in. As a follow-up to this presentation, as well as the initiatives and levers in academic services, we've developed a Canvas page that will become a virtual professional learning community for Columbus City Schools. It will include academic updates. It will include a photo exemplar gallery where you never know, you might find your classroom there. In addition, we'll have a discussion forum, a two-way communication tool where we will pose questions to you to seek out your ideas and your responses. We want to hear from you. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Kira Schlombach to conclude the presentation.
Thank you, Kenny, Leslie, and Kelly. I wanted for you to meet our team today, know that we're eager to support you, and also for you to begin to understand how we plan to increase reading achievement, develop portrait-ready graduates, and close opportunity gaps. But I also want to acknowledge that the information you heard today from our healthcare providers is heavy. Our community is in need, and when we pair that information with the start of yet another school year in a pandemic, you are all facing challenges. It is not our intent today to be numb to the realities we all face. The beginning of the school year is always paired with excitement, anticipation, maybe a little sadness as we mourn the passing of another summer, and hope. These feelings are likely magnified in the light of our current environments. I want you to know that we are dedicated to your success. We hope that you're able to be present for yourselves so that you can be present for your students, and that you found some takeaway today to begin to meet your students on Thursday. You are enough, and I hope that you authorize yourself to be all in for Columbus City School students. Thank you.